Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back. I am in the middle of some serious work. I hadn't planned on making a video for you this week because, as you can see, I've been a little bit busy. I need to prune all of the apple trees here in the garden, and in case you can't tell by the amount of stuff that's here, that really is no mean feat. Each of these apple trees, particularly the one behind me, has grown, well, to more than about 15 or 20 feet. It has been a lot of work with the chainsaw to get all of this material cut out. There's more off to one side, there's more behind me, but you can see that the form of the apple tree now is just so much better. It's that little bit smaller, it's that little bit more open, and ultimately, even if I take a little bit of a hit this year or next on the productivity levels, it's going to be healthier in the long run. But this has taken me about 2 days of work to get rid of all of this material, and I simply haven't had a chance to make a dedicated video for you. And I wasn't going to put out a video at all for you this morning. And then I realised a couple of weeks ago I made a dedicated Q&A video where I answered all of your questions. And actually, when I filmed that, to answer all of your questions took well over about half an hour or so, which was going to be far too much for one episode. And I never showed you the rest of those questions and answers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep working away at the apple trees, slogging away, because I've got another 6 trees to go. You can enjoy some more really good Q&As with me, where we talk about gardening and the channel and all sorts. And I'll see you next week for a regular episode. Okay, so I would be absolutely thrilled to hear from you what you recommend for ornamental grasses and flowering perennials that are suitable in a north-facing coastal garden near Dublin. I'm itching to plant up our relatively new front lawn, but really struggling to find suitable plants that will give me some of that peat Udolph texture. Okay, now you're talking my language because I love peat Udolph. Okay, so when it comes to grasses, there's actually a really good range of grasses because I think everybody thinks that they really need dry, baked, sandy, free-draining conditions. And yes, a lot of them do, but there are grasses that will tolerate a little bit more moisture. Things like carex, millennias, and cortadarias, they're always really good. Then when it comes to coastal plants, I'm going to give you some very general advice, which is look for things that have glaucous foliage or hairy foliage, because they're going to be really good for coastal sites. And this is going to seem like a total cop-out, but I have the very book here. Now, I am not on commission, but this is my favourite book, or at least one of my favourites, and it's called Planting a New Perspective, and it's by Pete Udolph and Noel Kingsbury. And the reason I'm saying about it now is that it has the most fantastic plant directory at the back of it, where it describes pretty much all of Pete Udolph's key plant choices, but the conditions that they like. So if you're wanting that look, consider getting this book. I have found it invaluable. Here's a cool question. The question is, do you do workshops? Very quick answer, no. I'm afraid I don't. I'm not ruling it out in the future, but it's not something I do at the minute. Moving swiftly on though, on to the next question. Can dahlias survive in pots without being dug up and stored? Okay. Yes, they can, and in fact, they can be left in the ground and not dug up during the winter, but it comes with one really big, what word am I thinking of? It comes with one really big disclaimer and a really big warning, which is you need to be careful of frost, because what's going to kill dahlia tubers is getting really badly frosted and sitting in heavy, wet ground. It's going to encourage them to rot, and then they won't come back next year. So what I would say is, if you do have them in pots, yes, keep them in the pots, but lift the pots away from where they are outside and bring them in somewhere sheltered so that they can rest during the winter. They're not going to sit waterlogged. They're not going to get repeatedly frozen, and they should be okay. If you are keeping them in the ground, you want to make sure that you're somewhere that doesn't get too cold. Now, I'm in Ireland, and I would say it's fairly borderline, but if you were living, for instance, in the south of England, you can most likely get away with it, providing you really mulch your dahlia as well. Right, Next question. If you could only keep one type of flower and grow one type of veg for the rest of your gardening life, what would it be and why? Okay, so that is a really difficult question because on flowers, I'm stuck between two. I'm either going to say foxgloves or calendula. Okay, I'm going to say calendula because it's something I can recommend to people because it's easy to grow. It looks fantastic. It's annual, but it's a really hardy annual. And there's loads of things that you can do with it. You can put it into creams, you can eat parts of it, you name it. It's brilliant. So I'm going to say calendula for the flower. And for veg, okay, technically it's not a veg, it's a fruit. Tomatoes or strawberries? Tomatoes. Tomatoes. Okay, I'm going to say tomatoes. Again, they're a really simple plant. Yeah, they're nothing crazy, but again, they're easy to grow. They're delicious fresh. They really remind me of the season. There's something lovely about picking your own tomatoes and that tomatoey smell. Plus you can cook with them, you can store them, you can freeze them, you can turn into sauces, you name it. So there you go, calendula and tomatoes. By the way, that answer will change week to week. What fruit or vegetable would you love to grow if climate wasn't an issue? Oh, okay. So I always struggle at growing peppers, like bell peppers. I always get maybe 1 or 2 in a year, but what I would love is to have the heat and the sun and the climate that meant I could grow them all the time because it's something that I eat all the time. Okay, I'd like to know if you only had a small 3x8 plot, what would you grow there to get the most out of it? And would you succession plant too? What I would do is I would get some containers going before anything else. So nice big containers, try some potatoes. If it's a sunny spot, and I don't know whether it is, you could get some tomatoes going in the summer. I would get things like that, some really quick impact if you've got just a small space. And then unfortunately, because I can't visualize your space, I don't know whether it's sunny or shady or whether it's paved or whether it's got grass, I would look at getting some nice raised beds in and growing some nice, quick, high-powered crops during the summer that are going to give you, do you know, that real oomph of seeing some success and then going from there? Things like courgettes, salad leaves and stuff like that. If you're only starting out gardening and it's your first bit of gardening space, don't even worry about bringing things on from seed. Go to the garden centre and get some baby plants and get them going. That would be my recommendation. Do you find it cheaper or more expensive to grow your own? Tricky, because I don't entirely know the answer to this. What I would say is at this stage for me, I imagine it's more expensive. And that's because if I look at the amount of money that I've had to invest in creating my veg garden, even though I made it with reclaimed scaffolding boards and things like that, there was still considerable expense to getting it started. If I look at that on a unit by unit amount or by weight, it's probably much more expensive. But the big thing is you're looking at it in a monetary term, whereas actually there's lots of other things to think about. What's the joy it gives me? What about me being outside? The health benefits of that? The fact that I know exactly how it's been grown and it's organic, the taste, all of it outweighs it. Plus, the other thing is that over time, if you're not continually putting a lot of money into your veg garden, the price of what you're growing is actually going to go down. Hopefully that answers your question. Hopefully. Okay, how did you choose your new hedges and who is installing them? So this relates to last week's video again about removing a massive section of hedge in the garden, and I'm talking massive, we're talking well over 60 meters of hedging. The secret garden is no longer a secret. All the way down the vegetable garden is wide open. Watch the video, I'll link it up there. In terms of hedge choice, I haven't decided yet. I'm still working it out, but what it needs to be is something really tough and something that's going to work both for me and my neighbour, that's going to grow nice and quickly, but will create a nice, strong screen. And I don't know who's going to be putting it in yet, but let me tell you, it's not going to be me, because it's a job that is way too big for me. I have learned from bitter experience that I need to be careful about what kind of jobs I take on. And finally, in this section, how do you prune your fruit trees? Do you keep them short and compact or just let them grow? Right, confession time. If you're familiar with the channel, you'll know that we have lovely old, really quite large fruit trees in the garden. I've barely pruned them because the job is huge. I don't know a lot about it, or well, I didn't know a lot about it. I know more about it now, but because of that, for the last few years, I've let them grow rampant. So this year, I'm going to be trying to really rein them in. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm getting some new young fruit trees that I'm going to be working with. So how do you prune your fruit trees? Barely at all, and when I do, not very well. I'm so sorry. The next question asks, if you had a choice and you wanted to get the best polytunnel, would you A, stick with the plastic, various grades out there, or would you get a polycarbonate one, double door, etc., for vegetables, propagation work, general things like that? So I have a plastic polytunnel. I was very lucky that the garden already had it when I moved here, and it's a brilliant growing space. But I think if I had my choice, I would go for something a little bit more rigid. I prefer the look of the polycarbonate ones. I think they look a bit more practical for where I live because they are that little bit more solid, and certainly anybody I know that has them loves them. So I think that would be what I would go for. I just need to get hold of one. A question about leaf mulch. Okay, here's a good one. What pH does leaf mold have, and does it vary with the type of leaf? Is it advantageous to mix it with compost? And can somebody speed up the process of making leaf mulch? Thanks in advance. Oh, well, you're welcome. Okay, so when it comes to acidity, freshly fallen leaves do tend to err just on the acid side. They're not particularly acid, but they are a little bit acid, and that varies from leaf type to leaf type. Main thing is though, if you shred them up and you create your leaf mold, the more that composting, that fungal composting process takes place, the more that pH shifts towards neutral. So it generally doesn't really cause you an issue if you want to mix it into things. Is it advantageous to mix with compost? 100% yes, it is, for loads of reasons. I think it helps with your soil microbiome, ultimately, especially if you're going to be introducing whatever you're mixing into the garden, because you're mixing a bit of your garden into that compost, which will ultimately end in the garden. It helps bulk up compost, so you're importing less into your garden. It probably saves you money. And also, leaf mold is fantastic to incorporate into seed starting mixes. It is so good. Final part to that question, how do you speed it up? Okay, two things for speeding it up. Number one, make sure to shred the leaves first. I do it by, rather than raking leaves, I lift the leaves with a lawnmower. It shreds them. I tip them into where I make my leaf mold and they break down really quickly. And second recommendation is go and find a bit of your garden where you can lift a little bit of existing leaf mold from maybe under plants or trees. If you can't do that, lift it from somewhere outside of your house and add that in. It effectively inoculates that set of leaves and they'll break down faster. Hopefully that helps. And final recommendation question is, what could you put into a composter that isn't food related? We had issues with mice, so it was either no food or no compost, I was told. So I got a worm bin for the food, and that's done well. Okay, well, great on going down the vermiculture route, super. No food doesn't mean no compost. It just means what you need to really be looking for are good brown and green materials. So the obvious things for green materials, grass clippings, fresh leaf clippings, anything that you cut or harvest from the garden, certain kinds of weeds, though I'd be careful if you're not experienced with composting about going down composting a lot of weeds unless you've really made sure that they're well dead first. If you don't have access to a lot of green stuff, go and ask your neighbours, go down the street, or go and find out if people have green waste that they want rid of. You'd be surprised at actually how easy it is to get hold of. Those are all of your greens. For browns, think of any kind of woody material. Think nice cardboard, not stuff that's laminated or brightly coloured. Nice plain brown cardboard. Brown paper, office paper, shred that up, that's going to work as browns. And also wood chips. It's amazingly easy to get hold of wood chips from all sorts of different sources, including landscapers. really what you need to do is kind of think outside the box and look at all sorts of materials. Essentially, if it's an organic material that you can see outside, you're going to be able to compost it down. I received some other really cool questions that I think you're going to find interesting when I give you the answers to them. And the first is, what takes the most time and effort in your garden? Upkeep. And I know that maybe sounds a bit general, but what I have found is this garden here requires just the largest, the biggest amount of upkeep. And I knew that when we moved here, and I did love this garden, I knew it was going to come with a lot of work. I didn't expect quite how much work. Coupled to that, the fact that I film it means that it slows almost every job down. So what I end up doing is spending quite a lot of time making content for you while trying to get gardening done. The gardening slows right down, and then what I end up having to do is do it afterwards as well. And then, of course, there's all of the stuff that's important to just keep the garden looking half decent, but that simply doesn't make interesting content. Staying on top of the grass, cutting edges, working on hedges, weeding, all of that stuff, all of that upkeep just takes so much time. And very closely related to that is the next question that says, how are you able to keep up with gardening chores as busy as you are? I have to look after the garden and look after the channel. I am able to keep up, but it keeps me very busy. I'm always doing something. Now, I'm quite a projecty person, and I do like always having something to do, even if it means that I've got something to moan about. But simply, I'm able to stay on top of it because I just keep on going and because I love it. I really love making the content to share with you, and I love my garden. Oh, right. I hope you enjoyed the Q&As. I'm going to keep working here. I hope you have a really brilliant week in your own garden, whatever you're doing. This week for me, it's going to be hard labour all week, but it's totally going to be worth it. And until next time, see you later.